Well, in paleo, we're like I said, we're doing a preliminary study. We wouldn't give it a classification, and the goal is to make recommendations for how thorough a study needs to be done in the area.
If you find significant stuff, what would be the next step?
The next step would, well, if we were to find significant resources in our preliminary analysis, we would probably make recommendations for some level of survey and mitigation, depending on what areas are being impacted and what we find and where we find it. There are a whole host of options, and it would be a question much better answered on the 29th when we have done some analysis. At this point, we haven't done any analysis.
Aren't the options already spelled out for different levels of things?
Well, recommendations are made based on project designs and areas that are going to be impacted and what's found, what kind of vegetation cover there is, how much bedrock is exposed, what the types of fossils are, and again, without having done any analysis yet, it's very tricky. I mean, I can give you a whole host of things, but it all seems senseless right now when we can wait for whatever it is, another 10 days or 12 days.
I guess what I'm fishing for is, isn't there a fairly set of procedures of what you do if this, if that, if this, if that?
I guess.
I mean, you've been doing this for 15 years. Certainly
yeah,
this has happened before.
Absolutely. So for example, we go out to a survey area and we find a fossil locality. Generally, as part of the initial survey, we'll collect those fossils. We have curation agreements with local museums. Those fossils would be curated. If it appears that there could be further damage during development, we would recommend monitoring during the development stage. If it looks like it's a truly important area that fossils would be damaged if any development was there, we would recommend not developing in that area, or we would recommend a modification of the development plan.
You're aware that this is a KT boundary site?
Absolutely. Believe me, we understand. I want to make it perfectly clear right now that Paul and myself have been subcontracted as paleontologists to do an unbiased survey. We don't have research projects going in the area, but we understand the importance of fossil material. We've worked with and in fossils for years and years, and our credentials stand for themselves. We will make an unbiased determination of what the next process should be following our analysis, whether it's nothing should be done there or whether we should mitigate completely. We will base it on what we observe in the field, on our literature searches, and on our museum searches. We are not on anybody's side here. We are purely here to do an analysis of what we observe in the field. I mean, the significance of paleontological resources are based on their value from a paleontological perspective. So it's fairly complicated. Virtually anything that's vertebrate is significant. Granted, if you're finding nothing but unidentifiable scraps, that you may not collect that stuff, but nonetheless that would indicate that significant material may be around. When you get to invertebrate material, and please, I'll clarify if people need the distinction between vertebrates and invertebrates, that starts to become based on whether or not these are rare specimens that we're finding or important for doing paleontological analyses such as biostratigraphic analyses. So there are strict laws about collecting vertebrate fossils, less strict laws about collecting invertebrates and plants. But again, when you find unique localities, unique specimens, important specimens for doing research, then those become significant as well.
When you say you're going to do a literature search, does that mean that everything that's been found anywhere in the Denver Formation or the Denver Basin is likely to be found in the same strata at Corral Bluffs, and you would expect that, although
That's a fairly complex question. We would certainly expect to find similar fossil material. However, the Denver Basin and the Denver Formation is a fairly thick sequence that covers a pretty extensive amount of time, and it's been subdivided into sort of biostratigraphic horizons, if you will.
Right.
And so that some, if you will, paleo species or genera show up on some horizons and not others. So we'll do as thorough a literature search as we can and get information on the Denver Basin broadly, as well as anything we can find specifically on Corral Bluffs, and then use that to help put the report together. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but in your preliminary, you're just going to be able to find whatever has eroded out on the ground now.
Yeah. Now,
and what would be the threshold that you would decide you needed to dig a test pit?
yeah, there's when you're dealing certainly with, and we're into the Paleocene now. So in the Cenozoic, we're dealing with mammals, fossil mammals. Most fossil mammals are collected as surface collections. Occasionally, when you have an exceptional site, you'll do excavations and digging. But unlike with dinosaurs, where if you find some dinosaur remains and it looks like it's a dinosaur, you're going to dig up the whole thing, you're going to excavate an area. That's less common in mammal surveys. So it really is dependent on what we observe, what the number of fossils are, how well preserved they are. Are they right on the surface, or are we seeing them just sort of poking out of the bedrock? Those are the kinds of ways we'll determine whether or not to do excavations. But my suspicion is if we were in a situation where it was such a rich site that we would consider excavating it, in that case, and this would be true in any survey we did, we would recommend that that area be avoided and not developed.
What would be the threshold of that? What would you have to stumble on?
Numbers? I don't know how to answer that really. We would want to see multiple specimens, not just parts of a single individual, but parts. And with mammals, it's often jaws and teeth, skull parts. Although you do find limb bones as well. But we would want to see specimens from multiple individuals. And I can't tell you specifically what the threshold would be, because that'll depend on all the rest of the information that we gather about the location.